I think everyone would agree that these are a problem.
I think that probably like within the next couple of years, if not sooner, you're going to see them start using drones to smoke their rivals.
Doug Livermore is the Senior Vice President of Solution Engineering at the CenCore Group and a Deputy Commander for Special Operations Detachment. Previously, he served as a Senior Intelligence Officer and as the Director of Special Programs in the Office of the Deputy Undersecretary of the Navy. Doug is a combat-proven, respected leader in the U.S. Special Operations community with many years of engagement in the global war on terror.
We are now almost 3 years into the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. I know there's a lot of talk about like donor fatigue and whether or not it's worth the continued support to the Ukrainians. And I do think it's important to do some of that humanizing to be like, hey, at the end of the day, it's not really just about dollars and cents. Like there's lives on the line. There will always be a human in the loop for a targeting decision.
There's kind of like a no man's land. Like the battle lines are drawn, and in the middle between the lines is drones.
The war in Ukraine has been a huge catalyst for this like rapid evolution of drone capabilities to include autonomy. At some point, you have to think about the defense differently, right?
It's going to be very hard, but we're trying.
The drone wars have begun.
Take me back to Doug as a kid.
All right. So yeah, Doug, I was born in Florida in 1982. My dad was career Navy, so I spent most of my childhood bouncing around a bunch of interesting locations, some better than others. Had a bunch of years in Coronado, California, Southern California, great place, great surfing, basically living almost on the beach. Then there were some trade-offs. Went to Naval Air Station Livermore. To anyone that hasn't been there, it's probably about the worst naval air station you could imagine, down in the right on the southern end of the San Fernando Valley.
Yeah.
A couple years in Massachusetts with my parents, and got to finish up all 4 years of high school in Maine before I shipped off for West Point.
All right. What's West Point like?
Ooh, West Point. You take all the good parts about going to college and you throw those away. You add in things like a lot of drill, mandatory intramural sports, but you got a lot of cool opportunities. Like while I was there, I was on the Infantry Tactics Club, so got to spend a lot of free time in the woods, doing infantry stuff, shooting machine guns, blowing stuff up. And then spent my last couple of years there also on the combat weapons team, which does all like the International Defensive Pistol Association competitions, the 3-gun matches, all that sort of stuff. And so I was blessed by having access to a ton of ammo.
Would you say you're a good shooter?
I'm better than average. I think, like most folks that have spent a lot of time shooting, I would never claim to be a great shot, never claim to know everything about shooting. I don't get out nearly as often now as I used to, especially now that I'm paying for all my ammo. But yeah, I think I'm a pretty decent shot.
Do you think you could shoot a drone?
No, I wouldn't count on it. Particularly, yeah, like you're talking about these Group 1 drones and things like this. Like no. If it is up in the air and moving, there's no way I'm shooting that down. And it's rather hilarious in a morbid sort of way when you look at a lot of these videos coming out of like Ukraine and elsewhere where soldiers are blasting away with their AKs at these things trying to hit them, and it's just...
Sometimes they do.
Sometimes. No, I mean,
But it's not often.
Yeah, big sky, little bullet theory. Every now and again they get lucky. In fact, I think one of the funniest videos I saw here in the last couple of weeks was a Russian soldier throwing his AK at a drone and hitting it. I mean, the drone exploded, and I think everyone survived on the Russian side, but
Man, that's desperate times.
Yeah, 100%.
So West Point, okay, so I went to Penn State. I did ROTC. So I looked at the Naval Academy,
Mm-hmm.
but I thought that it would be more fun.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I don't think any of my kids are going to even consider a service academy or ROTC. They're just have way more interest in other things. But when I have done that thought process to myself, it's like I don't regret myself going to West Point. I would be hard pressed to recommend in this day and age with all the other commissioning sources.
Yeah.
For not for nothing. I mean, when you go to a service academy, you incur a 5-year service commitment on the back end versus the 4-year through ROTC or.
I had a 5-year too.
Okay.
But because my naval reactors is special, it's like a special detail. So
okay, I can see that.
But yeah, normally you get the 4 years.
Yeah. So between the lack of socialization, like I've had this conversation with a bunch of folks where I just remember, I mean, around party culture, drinking, that sort of thing. Like at West Point, don't get me wrong, like there was a lot of drinking going on, but it was all on the DL. Really,
It really adds an element, you know.
Yeah.
You have to be a lot more sneaky.
Oh, 100%. And then, but then what you see on the back end is then all these folks get commissioned, they go out to the force, and like they've rarely had the same level of socialization that you see through ROTC or some of the other commissioning sources. And then like some guys absolutely lose their minds when they get out.
Oh my god.
Or they graduate and they go to the army.
That's pretty great. Yeah, so kids, it's Veterans Day today, so they wish you a happy Veterans Day at least.
Not yet, but we'll see.
This is our Veterans Day episode.
Oh yeah,
right
yeah,
here.
that's right.
This is it.
Yeah, happy Veterans Day,
yeah.
everyone.
Had to bring on a vet. Okay, so after so you did 10 years?
I did 10 years active duty. Yep, graduated and commissioned in May of 2004. Ended up leaving active duty in August of 2014.
Okay, why?
The global war on terror was starting to wind down a little bit. At that point, when I left active duty, let's see, I had deployed to Iraq twice, deployed to the Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mali, Central African Republic, Uganda, Djibouti, and Afghanistan, all within 10 years. At that point, I had all three of my kids. Wasn't seeing a whole lot of them. The war was kind of winding down. I was to the point in my career where I probably wasn't going to be particularly operational anymore. I'd already been an infantry platoon leader, an infantry company executive officer, commanded two special forces operational detachment alphas, so the A team, the ODAs as we call them in SF, and I was a senior captain, not really looking at a whole lot more operational time, and it seemed like a good time to make a bit of a change.
What's like the gnarliest place you ever deployed to?
Ooh, that is a tough
Congo?
one. Congo is probably the most austere. I was in a place called Kisangani, formerly known as Stanleyville. It's like basically if you put your finger right
Where's
in the middle.
Where's that? Pull that up.
Yeah.
Pull that up, Jack.
Kisangani.
We need to see this.
Yeah.
How do you spell it?
Kisangani with
Diamond.
There you go. There you go. Yep, Kisangani, DRC.
Yeah, let's look this up.
And that's downtown.
Okay, it looks pretty.
Well, those pictures make it look much nicer than it is.
What year? Yeah, I mean,
I was there in 2010.
I mean, it's up and coming still.
It is up and coming.
2010 might have been a little different.
Maybe more remote than that is if you want to.
This is like the downtown though.
Yeah, this is like
which
the
is
very
not much
downtown.
really if you think about it.
No.
Pull it up on the map on the Google Maps.
Yeah.
Let's see geographically.
There you go.
Oh, here we go. So there's a river there.
Yep, that's the Congo River.
Okay, so this is like the town outside of the jungle.
Yeah, 100%.
Do we have like an army base there?
No, so the Congalese have an army base there. In fact, the State Department paid for it all, built it up in 2010 when I was there. I think it's still there. But yeah, like so Kisangani, there's no road.
Yeah, the medical center here looks pretty nice.
Yeah, like there's no highway that runs from Kisangani to the capital Kinshasa all the way over on the west coast. And so really the only way to get from Kinshasa to Kisangani or back is via river. And the Congo River takes you about, I guess, 2 weeks is what I was told each way.
What do you, so what was, I mean, as much as you can share, what was like the mission here?
Yeah, I mean, that's all open source. So at the time in 2010, the main threat that we were facing in Congo was the M23 rebellion being one. But really more important than them was Joseph Kony and the Lord's Resistance Army. You remember in 2012, the whole Kony 2012 campaign? It like was one of the first viral social media campaigns.
Oh, yeah, I think I do.
Yeah, so in 2010, we had already kind of identified that Joseph Kony and his Lord's Resistance Army were a danger. And what we were doing here in Congo that year was, like I was saying, the State Department paid. We built a base to the southeast. In fact, if you pull up the overhead imagery, I think you can still see it. Anyway, and the whole point there was to train Congolese army battalions, really just one battalion at the time. So you see that hardball road, the N3, going out the east there? Yeah, just follow that down.
Right there.
Yep, past the airport.
It's going way down here.
No, not that far.
Okay.
Swing back. Switch over to imagery.
The satellite. I think it's the bottom right. The little, yeah. Oh, is there a satellite view?
There it is. Yeah. Right, layers. There you
There
go.
we go.
Yeah, so past the airport,
Our sound guy's still getting the hang
No
of
worries,
his job.
no worries.
He's still interviewing every episode.
Well, somewhere down there. Let's not waste a ton of time looking for it.
No,
But anyway.
oh yeah, we gotta waste a ton of time.
All right.
This is important.
All right. Well, scroll back up.
This is a brown river here.
Okay, so there's the airport, the quote unquote international airport.
Yeah.
Zoom in and actually follow the N4. I can't remember if it was off the N4 or the N3. I don't see anything that's right. See there.
Must be classified.
Okay, down. Zoom. Enhance. And
Enhance.
Go north.
Oh yeah, this is it.
No, further north. Yeah, to the north side of the road, I think. No, maybe not.
They've wiped it from Google.
They may have.
No,
but anyway,
that makes sense. They probably need to.
Well, and I don't know if it was maintained after we left, and the jungle tends to reclaim things pretty quickly.
Yeah. What was it though? It was like a base.
Yeah, so there was a base that the State Department paid to build out there in the middle of the jungle. We would commute daily from the city to go train this Congalese Army battalion that was out there. That was under Operation Olympic Chase. So yeah, if you just Google Operation Olympic Chase, you'll pull up I think the graduation ceremony.
Operation Olympic Chase.
Yeah. Okay. If you scroll down, I think there's some like articles about it. Yeah. Okay. The Operation Olympic Chase graduation ceremony there in 2010. I was there. So that guy on the left is the battalion commander. Interesting dude. I don't even know if he's still alive now, but he was trained by the Belgians because Congo was a former Belgian colony. So Western trained, and then he was selected to be the battalion commander. The battalion itself was fascinating because it was actually comprised largely of former rebels. Like all the officers were Belgian trained, Congolese officers. Most of the enlisted were some form of actual Congolese army, but like the vast majority of all the soldiers were all former rebels that had surrendered and then been integrated into the Congolese army. So
that's
anyway.
cool. All right, so
that was my 2010 deployment.
All right, so now we're almost to 2024.
Almost,
but there were some things that happened along the way.
Yeah. So also potentially in the running for austere locations was a place called Gao, Gao, Mali. This was my second deployment as a SF detachment commander. We were up in Gao in 2011. Yep. So you see the airport there that we were based out of the airport. So it's up on the Niger River that you see there. Fascinating. So at the time in 2011, there were Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb running around basically like north and east of the Niger River. We were there.
What were they doing there? Just like
so at the time, a lot of smuggling, like historical smuggling routes across the region. The other thing that kind of exacerbated a lot of that was the civil war in Libya that kicked off while we were there. So a lot of requirements for guns and ammo and soldier or rebels to go back and forth. And then there's this fascinating interplay that I've done a little bit of research and writing on, where if you look at like northern Mali, southern Algeria, and southern Libya, there's a tribal group called the Tuaregs that were at the end of the day when, and not to get into ancient history.
No, we got to.
Yeah. But the Berlin Conference in 1895, I think it was, or 1875, when all the European powers divided up the spheres of influence in Africa and said, like, Belgium, you're going to get Congo, and Germany, you're going to get this, and France, you're going to get that. Those boundaries were all drawn without any sort of like respect to the tribal groups or the ethnic groups or anything like that. And Mali is a perfect example of like, and somewhat by design, the French had it. So you had the Tuareg portion up in the north and the Bambara, which were the main tribe down in the south. And anyway, in 1960, when all these European powers started to like divest of their colonial holdings, like the borders still all stayed with what the spheres of influence had been. So the Tuaregs were a great example. They had fought a civil war against the Malian government in Bamako in 1960, like 1970, 1980, 1990, 2000. It was like almost every 10 years there was a Tuareg rebellion.
Yeah.
So anyway, long story short, when I'm here in 2011, in 2008 there had been in 2009 there had been a peace treaty the latest version of the peace treaty where the Malian government said, okay, like Tuareg rebels, lay down your arms. We're going to integrate a bunch of you into the military. And the unit that we were training up here in Gao was predominantly former Tuareg rebels. The commander I was working with, which I got a picture somewhere, but like he had been fighting in some way, shape, or form as a Tuareg rebel against various governments, either the Malian government or the Algerian government or the Libyan government, since he was like 12 years old. And he was in his mid to late 40s in 2011 when he was my counterpart here when we were training in Gao. But yeah, again, very, very austere.
What do you think like the state of Africa is today? Like, how does it, does it work like this? This is how I think it works. Tell me if this is totally wrong because I have no idea.
Okay.
The State Department does analysis of the region, right?
Yeah.
High level, and they determine, which warlords are good or bad, basically. Is that right?
No, I'd say as a general rule, the State Department is going to defer to whatever the internationally recognized government is, right? So in the case of Mali, now Mali's a total...
But do they sometimes determine, like, this government could be a threat?
Sometimes. I mean, yes, 100%. Like, there's the State Department outside of combat zones. So, like, for most of my military career, Iraq and Afghanistan were the declared combat zones. Outside of that, State Department has primacy for foreign policy.
Okay.
Specific to Africa, I think that to the greatest extent possible, the State Department, yes, there are certainly some governments that are assessed as more friendly to the U.S., right? Like at the time, in the early 2000s, Mali was a close partner of the United States. Congo was a close partner of the United States. Libya, before the Civil War, was definitely anti-U.S. under Muammar Gaddafi.
Yep.
Sudan, obviously, generally has been considered hostile to the United States. Al-Qaeda was based out of there initially for a bunch of years in like the early 90s, before bin Laden jumped to Afghanistan. So like lots of bad blood in some countries, and those were obviously identified. Now, I think one of the challenges becomes is like what we've seen in particular, and we could spend a whole session talking about this in like West Africa.
I'm into it.
Yeah, where you've seen, there's a strong anti-colonialism that, obviously makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
The French and the
Don't tread
Belgians
on
and the
me.
Germans. And so like in many of these countries, former Francophone or former colonial possessions, like don't really have a lot of love lost for the Europeans. Some countries like France have continued to exert a pretty strong influence over the region economically and linguistically, since French is still like the lingua franca for a number of these countries, to include Mali. But then when you start looking at foreign interference, I've published a couple pieces on Russian disinformation, misinformation campaigns
In this region?
in West Africa that like really seek to amplify those existing grievances towards the colonial powers, particularly in like the context of the broader global competition between the West and say like Russia. China's not really a direct competition in the sense that for influence and information or in the information environment, but certainly like the Chinese have been making tremendous headway economically, getting into markets and
they're trying to get down
markets.
here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like West Africa in particular, which is where I spent a ton of time, Central Africa as well, we see this growing anti-colonialism, a lot of times exacerbated by Russian misinformation and disinformation, which leads to instability in those governments that had previously been at least like cooperative with the West. And we've seen in rapid succession. So like the Malian government was overthrown in a coup, like multiple coups, and now there's a
Recently or?
in the last year.
Okay.
I mean, there's a transitional government right now
Yeah.
that's led by a military junta in Mali. In Niger, that one happened more recently. I mean, there's the ongoing civil war in Libya where like there's a internationally recognized government of national accord, which the West supports in the U.S., and then there's the House of Representatives and the Libyan National Army that's like more aligned with the Russians, for instance.
Yeah, you don't hear much about Libya in the news.
No,
it's mostly
it's stripped
dominated
off.
by U.S. politics or Ukraine or maybe China.
Yeah.
But you don't read about it on the front pages.
Yeah, and frankly, for Americans, Africa's not all that particularly important because I think there's not a real clear understanding, and we can tie this back to drones in the sense that all of the rare earth minerals, which are vitally important for anything related to electronics, Like the vast majority of them come out of Africa right now.
Well, didn't we just find some in Oklahoma or something?
We did. I think
Let's
it
pull
was
up the lithium, right?
Yeah, lithium mine.
Well, I was saying, so like the North American region probably has a ton. We just haven't looked for it yet.
Yeah, and there's a cost barrier, right? Like the attractiveness of Africa as a resource-rich region is that you can also get labor ridiculously cheap or damn near free. Now, as we all know, like the conditions at the mines are absolutely horrific, and people are.
Have you been to any? Or
yeah, I mean, not during active operations, but like I'm fairly familiar with mining of rare earth minerals in Africa, and it's absolutely a horrific process. That I mean, there's no. We'll just say, like ecologically speaking, there's no consideration taken to like preserve doing sustainable mining, but like you were referencing before, also the manner in which it just like chews up people and destroys lives.
I've seen pictures. It's
horrific.
It looks devastating.
Yeah.
Just like basically, I mean, it's like it's like sulfur mining or like there's like lithium phosphorus. It's like yellow.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And you see like yellow covering their skin.
And stuff. It's like everyone's getting cancer or getting respiratory diseases and like dying at ridiculously young ages, assuming they're not like worked.
We need like robots to go mine this shit.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the cost, right? Like if you're a Chinese company that needs rare earth minerals to make components, like I don't know
to make these brushless motors.
Yeah, and I have I don't know where these brushless motors are sourced from, but I'm willing to bet China. Yeah. So so China does not have, and this is again the cost barrier to entry, where China has no qualms ethically about strip mining in Africa and working a bunch of Africans to death if they get the components that then we're all buying.
Africa seems to be like it's like the world's piggy bank.
Oh, 100%.
That's kind of fucked up.
Well, and what's fascinating is it is the world's piggy bank, and so this is why there's there is certainly some credence to be given to the Africans that are opposed to like the centuries of exploitation by the West, which undoubtedly occurred. Like great book I always recommend for anyone getting involved in Congo, King Leopold's Ghost. Like unlike other colonies in Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo, or at the time Belgian Congo, was unique in the sense that it was like the personal holding of the King of Belgium. And as such, like there was no oversight. There wasn't like, and they just like raped that area. So like Africa has unfortunately gone through these like cycles of horrific exploitation by outsiders. It was the Europeans before, now it's the Chinese. And at the end of the day, like, so there's a capital flight, right? Like so much of the money that's generated in the region in Africa from all of these various pick a industry or pick a resource flees the continent and goes to China or goes to Swiss bank accounts or I mean the US to an extent. So I totally understand and I'm sympathetic to like the frustration that various folks in Africa feel. Now the solution is always like we're going to overthrow this government and install a new junta that is going to further exploit the people and get super duper rich and then move the money offshore.
And then the cycle continues. Man, it's kind of never ending. It seems like I don't really see the path, for them to get everyone out of there, like all these countries coming in there and annoying them.
Yeah, and agreed. I mean, as far as so Chinese companies generally don't do long-term investment in Africa. You could just Google and see like they'll come in.
You get a lot of like Chinese private military.
Yeah, they'll do
like PMC Chinese
100%. Yeah, they'll do. I'll call it like short-term infrastructure development. Like we're going to build a road from here to here, which may benefit the locals, but in reality, it's so we can better transport the extracted minerals. And when the minerals are all extracted, then they stop maintaining it and it falls apart.
Yeah, actually, speaking of private militaries, the I don't know how much you've studied them or looked into them much. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know how. So I'm a startup guy. Yep. Like obviously, I've been doing startups for 10 years, and when I first started Allen Control Systems, I was originally running around with a pitch deck that it was going to be a private military called World Marshal.
Nice. All right.
And so
I like the branding.
First of all, it's a badass name, World Marshal Inc.
Yeah.
I still own the URL, worldmarshal.com. Anyways, I was running around with this pitch deck to investors of like, I'm going to create a private military using drones and anti-drone technology. It's kind of like an area denial, like PMC, kind of like a new age Blackwater or something, but with more tech.
Yeah.
And then about 2 months into coming up with this business plan, I was like, I am not the guy to build this company. I can't build this. I was like, we should just do a regular tech company and make an autonomous gun turret and sell it to private militaries. Because I was like, think about the mechanics of actually building one of them. It's a lot of work to build a private military.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
It'd be so much work.
The infrastructure is particularly...
I think I was too lazy.
Well, I would say like a huge challenge just off the top of my head, and I'm sure you already identified it, which is part of the reason why you spent 2 months on this idea, was like just the comms infrastructure to... Now, granted, you were talking about the drones being largely autonomous.
But like recruiting for it, like getting people to operate the tech, like sourcing the tech from the vendors. Like the whole thing was just totally off the wall. I would run around with the pitch deck and be like, I'm going to have the biggest military in the world. And investors would be like, this is awesome. They have no idea how hard it would be, though. They've never, like most venture capitalists haven't been pitched a private military.
No, I'd imagine.
So when you go to like a Bay Area VC and you're like, yeah, bro, we're going to make a private military. It's going to rival the army. They're like, cool, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. I have in my head, and I don't know if this was your concept, like you remember the start to the reboot on the RoboCop movies? When they were talking about like all the robots like doing peacekeeping or whatever somewhere. Yeah, that's sort of what I envision when you tell me like a autonomous robotic PMC.
So what I really realized was one, I'm not the person to execute on this. And the key thing for startups, like when you're founding a startup, is the founding team really should be able to execute the whole company.
Yep.
Given enough time and space and like if you couldn't recruit anyone, do you have the skill sets to like actually build this thing? And introspectively, I did not. But then also there was just like a lot of headwinds with like the technologies. I noticed like when I started like trying to be like, okay, let's just assume my PMC is going to deny this area from drones. So like if drones come in, we kill the drones. Okay, then I had to go start to talk to all the vendors. And I would be like, hey, can I buy some of your jammers? Can I buy this stuff for my like squad? And they were like, no. You can't buy anything, Steve.
What year was this?
This was like a year ago.
Oh, okay.
Like a year and a half ago. And then I realized, then it led me to the next conclusion of like, oh, we should just make the weapon that shoots the drones. And then, maybe down the road we'll operate it. But I think that the military will probably do a little bit of a better job than us.
Yeah, well, and that you were doing this a year ago, I know the tech had come a long way. I know that in particular, like the war in Ukraine has been a huge catalyst for this like rapid evolution of drone capabilities to include autonomy. One of the things that, thinking back to my own early days of using drones, like I was in Iraq in 05, in 06, 07, when we were using like the Group 1 Raven UASs that like were absolutely horrific, and like you'd be sitting on the roof with
see if we can get a pic of that.
Yeah, with this like giant control system that was like line of sight radio, I think.
Man.
And if you had any sort of interruption, like even the jammers on the trucks that we had, the jammers for the improvised explosive devices would like cut the feed, and then you'd lose the Raven. And then you're like launching a combat operation to go like dig around in the jungle or, in the, where I was at, like the farmlands of Iraq to find one of these stupid little at government rates, it was probably like a $30,000 drone. So like to go from that, like the early days of my experience with drones to where we are now, where, you pull up all the videos of drone activity in Ukraine or anywhere else in the world. I mean, I was just seeing some new video footage from drones in Myanmar, right, where they've been importing the tactics and whatnot from Ukraine. And it's just like night and day. But to the point being is like when you've seen drones then operating in a contemporary combat environment with all the electronic warfare jamming.
Yeah.
And now there's like, okay, well now we have to get after autonomy in a way that I think like largely we didn't have to think about too much, but when we start looking at future conflicts and even just like operating environments with low communication capabilities, like you don't have a bunch of cell signal, you don't have maybe satellite comms aren't great there. You have to look at how do you operate drones autonomously?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what's happening in the Ukraine conflict, it's kind of like there's kind of like a no man's land. Like the battle lines are drawn, and in the middle between the lines is drones.
Oh yeah, 100%.
It's kind of like hanging out, ready to kill.
Yeah, and what's fascinating from like a demand signal is before the Ukraine war, I don't think anyone really thought about like Group 1, Group 2 UAVs, UASs drones as attritable, meaning like a one-time use.
Yeah.
And now it's just like you see the vast production. I know the Ukrainians have set up a bunch of domestic production to like just turn out really like probably like group 1, group 2 drones for use on first-person attacks. And you just like think about the amount of resources that go into that. If like you're going to build this drone, you're going to really spend similar money and capabilities and technology for like a one-time use. Now I'm going to put a warhead on this thing and fly it into some Russian's face.
I mean, I really consider them to be more, they're kind of just like munitions.
Yeah.
Like they're just, you know, like you have these like, have you seen like prox rounds or guided rounds?
Yep.
You know, those are $1,000 a round. And these are, you know, these are cheaper than $1,000, but there's like $1,000. You can imagine $1,000 DJI Mavic or something.
Yep.
It's kind of just like a better guided munition.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think it's important when you're thinking about different types of UAVs. Like, to your point, like everyone keeps, and again, we can spend some time on this. Like the Russians are now producing their domestic version of the Shahed 136, the Iranian drone, but they're calling it the Garin 2. That's, yeah, okay, it's billed as a drone. Yes, it has some maneuver capability, and it can receive, I guess the distinction is it can receive.
How does it launch?
The Garin / Shahed 130.
Just out of the back of the angle truck.
It's the angle thing, and it shoots it off. But like at the end of the day, it's not really a drone per se. It's really more like, you know, what you're saying, a guided long range munition.
Like a group 3.
Yeah.
They are just like kind of slow missiles.
Yeah, 100%.
Basically.
Which is fascinating. Like I was watching video from the Ukrainian drone attack on Moscow yesterday, where like some of these, I mean, they're definitely like group 3.
Wait, this was yesterday?
4s.
There was an attack yesterday?
Yeah.
I missed the news.
Yeah, Ukraine did their largest drone attack on Moscow to date. And it was the news was all hitting yesterday. But like,
I missed this yesterday.
You watch the videos from it. Yeah. You watch the videos and it's like these relatively large, slow moving drones just kind of like droning through the sky.
Where did it hit? You know?
Well,
have you been to Moscow?
No.
I've been to Moscow. It's honestly, it's beautiful. I went in, when I was in the Navy. I had to get like, I had to get approvals. That top secret clearance.
Yeah.
But I got the State Department approved. I was living in DC at the time. It was harder to get my visa than it was to get the approval from the State Department. Like just getting their visa.
What year was that?
2009.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think we could go there now.
No, certainly not now.
But
nor would I.
I went in January as like a 22, 23-year-old in like a January in Moscow, staying in like a hostel.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we were cheap. We were doing it on the cheap. I found $145 round trip flight.
Nice.
My friend was really in my other Navy buddy, Scott Bold. He's really into like cheap flights, like finding the like glitches and
just go for an adventure.
So he runs over to my cubicle and he's like, Steve, got $145 round trip to Moscow. We got to buy it in the next 10 minutes.
Ooh.
And I was like, hit it.
Yeah.
Dude, it was fun though.
Yeah. So again, don't have any real Russian experience myself. My understanding from talking to folks who have spent a lot of time there is like, yeah, Moscow's beautiful. St. Petersburg
kind of reminds me of DC.
Yeah.
Actually, like the wide streets, like the wide between buildings. There's a lot of room. Not like New York City.
Right. But my understanding is if you go outside like St. Petersburg or Moscow, things get real rough real fast.
Oh man, we did. Yeah, we were a little crazy as younger kids. We took a bus to the outside of Moscow, like way outside. We did a Google Translate to find a polar bear club in January that were chiseling out ice in the Moscow River, and they would jump in.
Ooh.
And it was Russians doing this, and we found them. And we get out there, it's like 4 Americans, and I'm with a black guy and a gay guy. And the gay guy can obviously hide, but they're not very into gay guys in Russia.
No, yeah, they're not particularly.
But the black guy was sticking out like a sore thumb, especially outside of the city limits.
Yeah.
Anyways, so we get to this area, and they can't speak English very well, and we roll up, and we're wearing colors. Like I have like a bright blue jacket on, and that's not the style there. Like they know we're not from there because we're wearing colors. Like if you wear black in Moscow.
Yeah, you got to. Isn't it like all like the black running suit?
Basically.
Yeah.
Anyways, so we get out there and we like try to like meme that like, hey, can we get in the river? Can we get in with you guys? And anyways, like they let us do it with them. And then the one person that can speak English was like, we've never seen Americans out here. You guys are nuts.
So how does that work? You like jump in, you jump out, you go like you got a fire to go dry yourself?
So I was this for OPSEC. I decided to not get in.
Yeah.
Also because I'm a little bitch.
Yeah.
But I was too cold. But I watched the stuff. Everyone stripped down.
Oh, okay, got it.
And I watched all of our stuff so that we didn't die out there.
Then you just dry off.
Although they could easily have taken me out. Like, look at me.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I've heard tales. Some bad stuff can happen in Russia.
We were in a random suburb outside of Moscow just trying to find this polar bear club, and we were walking through this neighborhood, and this really, really jacked army Russian guy like comes out to get his mail, and he's in like full camo, combat boots, and he walks down his driveway. It's snowing. It's snow everywhere, January, and he just looks at us, and he cocks his head. He shakes his head. He's like, "What? What are these people doing? Who are these four people?"
Well, like you said, yeah, you looked at a place just by your dress alone. Not to say nothing about the black
My favorite
guy.
part of Moscow, though, was I loved like going to dinner there, and then at the end of the meal, they'd bring you like a menu of cigarettes.
Oh yeah,
and you can just get one cigarette of any brand you want. Like and they bring it out on like a tray. Like,
nice.
Here's your cig. That's classy.
that is classy.
They don't do that in the U.S. anymore.
No.
Nicotine's out of style.
No, absolutely.
Nicotine in defense tech's big though. All the defense tech, like ZYNing. Everyone.
Yeah, so ZYN is fascinating. I just so I was in Iraq. I'm still in the Guard, the National Guard, and I deployed to Iraq for most of 2022 as the deputy commander for the Special Ops Advisory Group out there, based out of Baghdad. But anyway, a bunch of the other folks in the unit were like, "Okay, I'm going to use this deployment to get over my dip."
Yep.
Or, kick the habit.
Yep.
And I'm going to switch to ZYN.
That's really kicking the habit.
Right. Well, I think the intent, as I understand it, is like you start on the ZYN and then you like wean yourself off of it. Of course,
that's the intent.
That's the intent. But I know by the end of the deployment, folks were like triple, quadruple over what their original dosage was at the beginning. Now it's just like, yeah, you've replaced one addiction for another. I guess it tastes better and it doesn't jack up your teeth. But yeah, now you're just addicted to ZYN.
Yeah. Now there's like influencers are launching ZYN brands. It's a whole thing in the U.S.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean,
Tucker Carlson's got a ZYN
know
brand.
that.
He launched a ZYN brand.
Does he actually use it or is he just hawking it?
I think he's just hawking it.
Ooh,
I mean, they got to monetize their fame somehow.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Why not sell drugs?
Hey, I mean, as far as I'm trying to remember, I'm sure the FDA's got I think they have some sort of regulation on ZYN, but still at the end of the day, like as of yet, there's no, as far as I know, no known negative health effects. It's just pouring money into an addiction.
Who really knows? Who really knows what the effects are of any of this? Like similar with Ozempic.
Yeah,
seems like a miracle drug.
Everyone wants it now. I mean, I know. Well, this real quick on Ozempic. I know this came up in a conversation with somebody the other day where I'm like, yeah, I got it. It seems to be, it just melts fat away. So awesome.
It's just shredding my fat.
Yeah. So like those of us. Well, anyway, those of us that work out, I guess we're just dum-dums and we should just like be eating everything we want and taking Ozempic. But the downside is Ozempic was originally, I think, designed to treat, trying to remember what the condition was, but actual health issue. Diabetes, that's right.
Yeah.
So now my understanding is like actual diabetics are having a hard time finding Ozempic because like it's all flying out the door for people that want to just shred their fat.
So back to the Iraq. So you were in Iraq recently then?
Yeah. So I've done 3 tours in Iraq. I was there in 2005 as an infantry platoon leader, duking it out in Sadr City and some other nice places. Went back for a 15-month deployment in 2006 to 2007. I was down in South Baghdad, the Triangle of Death, still in the infantry. That was a company XO and a battalion assistant operations officer. And then, like I said, I left active duty in 2010, but I stayed involved with the National Guard. And yeah, I deployed to Iraq in 2022. I was there pretty much the whole year. It was like it was surreal having been there. You know, the last time I left had been November of 2007, and then I come back in January of 2022. In many, many ways, it was like a completely different experience in country, but in also some other ways, it's like, we're 18 years later and it's, it's still probably not 18. No, this is why I don't do math publicly.
24 or
22, 07 to 22. 15 years. Yeah. Sorry. 15 years later.
Where's it headed?
I mean, my perspective is it's nowhere good. And we've been watching this like slow motion train wreck for a while. So as real quick history lesson. So we go into Iraq and the U.S. and our partners go into Iraq in 2003, overthrow Saddam Hussein.
Yep.
We think that the Iraqi people are going to greet us as liberators. What we didn't realize was like Saddam Hussein was keeping the lid on that pressure cooker. You see all the sectarian violence. That was my experience for my first couple of deployments, the Sunnis on Shias.
Yep.
That's the Obama administration. That's when we couldn't get a status of force agreements with the Iraqis. So we said, all right, screw it. We're out of here. You guys figure it out for yourselves, Iraqis. ISIS shows up, right? And then there's the Islamic State. They form their caliphate. We get invited back in 2014 to help the Iraqis clean up ISIS. But like throughout this whole period, you see by overthrowing Iraq and like setting the sectarian fight into play, we were creating the pathways by which the Iranians were able to exert more and more influence. And then like by the time of my 22 deployment, ISIS is largely on the ropes. Like there's some dudes hiding out in the mountains, in caves, and our Iraqi partners with our U.S. and other NATO partners go out and dig them out of the holes every now and again. But like the Iranian-aligned militias, the term keeps changing. I think it was Iranian-aligned militia groups while I was there, but most of these are part of the Popular Mobilization Front, all these government-affiliated but Iranian-sponsored militia groups, and they're just continuing to gain more and more influence.
It's not good.
Well, in fact, like when those 3 U.S. soldiers were killed in the drone attack in Jordan at Tower 22, like those drones originated out of Iraq, and we have every reason to believe that it was the Iranian-aligned militia groups that launched them. So now we are to the point in more recent history, the Iraqi government has officially asked the U.S. and our NATO partners to wrap up our mission and leave.
Are we gonna?
I think we're going to. I mean, we kind of have to. We're there at the invite of the Iraqi government, and the Iraqi government's asking us to leave. I think once we're out of the picture, Iran will probably further solidify their control, and then really it's on the Iraqi people to figure out, like, are they going to be more aligned with Iran, or are they going to be more aligned with the rest of the region? So I'm not hopeful just because of the level of influence
that Iran
has, and it seems to be increasing. And I've done a few articles on that. It's just I think we're probably too far down the road to really pull that one back from the edge.
Jack, make sure we subscribe to his articles. We need to read these.
Yeah, if you jump up on LinkedIn, I think I'm up to like 62 or something articles there.
Yeah, we need to. Is that what you post them mostly?
Yeah.
Well,
And
also, let's include some of these in the show notes. We got to pump these.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So yeah, that sounds like a pretty terrible situation for us in Iraq. Then
it is. It's a terrible position to find ourselves in. I think I don't know what the new Trump administration is going to want to do vis-a-vis Iraq. Like I said, I don't necessarily know that we can counteract the Iranian influence. My suspicion, my prediction, and my concern is like ISIS is still a thing. They're still there. There are large swaths of in particular Sunni Iraqis that don't feel particularly well represented by the Shia-dominated and Iranian-influenced central government. And that's why ISIS so rapidly grew the first time around. So we could see ISIS 2.0 here if we were to completely pull out of the region.
Not good.
No.
Well, so when you were there recently, how were drones
drones,
used?
yeah. So I was based out of the green zone. I mean, drones were a constant threat. A lot of those, like I was saying, the Popular Mobilization Front, the Iranian-aligned militia groups, like they would be operating drones all the time over the green zone, coming and doing surveillance and trying to see who was doing what inside the NATO base where I was at, and the U.S. Embassy complex, which was right next door.
So mostly it's a lot of surveillance drones.
Yeah, so a lot of like these, we'll call them like group ones. Like it was fairly frequent. So we would sleep. We had our barracks with all the concrete barricades and other protective measures. But yeah, like whenever a drone was detected on the radars or visual, like we'd have to jump into the bunkers and wait for to get the all clear. So you do that in particular when there was some of the hot times in 22, like in August when there was that big dust up between the solderists. Which was one political bloc, and the PMFs, the Popular Mobilization Front, like they were having gunfights inside the green zone for a while there, like drones and rockets. And at that time, so
crazy.
My experience was kind of the more traditional, the PMF, the Iranian aligned groups would use like the group ones to do surveillance, to do their targeting, then they'd shoot some rockets from outside the green zone and hit some stuff. So the drones were good as almost like a warning, and which is why then we'd run into the bunkers. I think I have not been there since like we've seen the introduction of first-person drones and some of the more advanced capabilities that we know that those militias are using now.
I could say this is becoming more regular warfare now. What is currently the irregular warfare of the day?
Yeah, no, it's fascinating that you bring that up, and I'm not going to get into all the definition.
I'd like to know what's irregular and what's not. What's regular?
Yeah, so this is this is kind of the dirty secret inside of the defense industry, right? Like right now, under our current doctrine, there is large-scale combat operations, which is kind of what we traditionally think about with conventional, unconventional force, big armies and big navies and big air forces fighting against something that looks similar to them. Irregular warfare, and again, you ask 10 different people in this town, you get 10 different definitions. My definition and what I kind of operate under is it's any form of attempts to achieve asymmetric advantage over an adversary, either through technology or unique vectors.
So pretty much it transitions to becoming regular pretty fast.
Yeah.
If you find something that's working. It's
100%.
It's like in the Revolutionary War, we're shooting from the trees instead of, marching right at the British.
Yeah, 100%. And what I was going to say is like the dirty little secret is if you look at the history of warfare, like the vast majority over the extent of human history has been what we would term irregular warfare, right? Like it is very, very rare that two countries field a military that stands toe to toe. Like we number them. It's so rare.
Yeah.
So yeah, irregular warfare is really at the end of the day like
it sounds
the default.
Badass though.
But it does sound badass.
It's like I study irregular warfare.
And for what it's worth, one of the challenges we've had, particularly in this town, is Congress has gotten in on the act, and like you look at some of the National Defense Authorization Acts. I think it was like the 2017 directed the Department of Defense to define irregular warfare. The 2019 NDAA said stand up an irregular warfare center, which not for nothing. I love the irregular warfare center. At IWI, at the Irregular Warfare Initiative, we work fairly closely with the Irregular Warfare Center. The IWC is the government-funded and established center for irregular warfare across the Department of Defense. So anyway, all to say, like, there is certainly a recognition that this is something that the Congress and the American people, like, I think it's a term that's starting to gain some traction. So right, wrong, or indifferent, like I said, I don't think it's actually an irregular or a not common form of warfare. It's just the term we're forced to use.
How do we think? Well, I mean, I think everyone would agree like that these are a problem. Like they would all mostly agree in the U.S. I'm out there selling a gun turret that shoots these down. So like I have a lot of conversations with the customer, I'll say, and I think that generally accepted it's a problem. But I don't think we acutely know how much of a problem it is because we're not actually in the war. Like we're not experiencing it the same way like we're watching it. Yeah,
but I mean, we are literally right around the corner from it. Like you look at, like I was mentioning, so a lot of the tactics, techniques, and procedures that you see with drones in Ukraine are showing up all over the world. Like I mentioned Myanmar, if you wanted to pull up like Myanmar drone attack, there was a video that just came out.
That's right. That's a good use of Jack. See, you're a natural on the podcast.
Now I got it.
You'd be like, Jack, just pull the fucking thing up,
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, so there's tons of videos that have been dropping.
Keep them working.
And there was one I saw just the other day that was the Myanmar government forces using a first-person drone to smoke a bunch of rebels.
Yeah. How did we get like the this was what just happened recently? We got to figure out how Google you got to do like a relevant news search.
Oh yeah, it's probably
hit news.
Yeah.
No, it's all about the news. So anyways, what's going on in Myanmar? You tell me.
So Myanmar, so there's a rebel group, the Rohingya, and the government is. I won't get into the who's right or who's wrong.
Yeah, of course.
But the point is, both sides we've seen introduce first-person attack drones, like taking tech and tactics straight from Ukraine. If you look back in like 2023, we saw both sides in the Sudanese civil war. So you have the Rapid Support Forces, which were one rebel group, and then the Sudanese government, both employing drones, just like in Ukraine. In fact, like some of the videos from that, I think it was there was a great video reel of somebody, we don't know who, hitting a bunch of RSF like convoys with first-person attack drones. And I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that it was like clearly Africa, you'd be like, oh, this is Ukraine.
Man.
And then I guess the last point I'll say, again, this is, I think, a worldwide phenomenon, but even in Mexico. So let's go right across the border with the narcos fighting against the Mexican forces. For one, we know that the narcos are using drones to move drugs across the southern border. Of course. But like the extent to which we see and as, again, but for your audience, like the narcos in many cases have paramilitary forces that rival the military capability of the Mexican state. And we've seen them start to use drones in that same way to strike government targets. So I think it's only a matter of time before, look at any of the major street gangs in the United States. I think that probably like within the next couple of years, if not sooner, you're going to see them start using drones to smoke their rivals.
Have you read 7 Seconds to Die or seen that book?
Yeah.
The Armenian Azerbaijani conflict. Yeah. That was like the one of the first like conflicts that was like total drone war.
Oh yeah. There's been some great
the Armenians got wrecked basically by the Azerbaijanis.
Yeah, and like when you're talking about like a short duration fight like that, whichever side has innovated with drones the first, basically, I think can win that fight.
Yeah, the other thing I thought was interesting, maybe this is kind of more in the irregular warfare part of it, where, since all of these drones have a camera on them, you can kind of televise every kill.
Yeah.
So they did a really good job of like social media where they would show the Armenians like how badly they're getting crushed.
Yeah.
And it like demoralized the population, basically.
Oh yeah, like social media is a huge component. Again, I mean, what I watch most closely is Ukraine because I think whatever we see there kind of falls out elsewhere. But like Ukrainians have been masterful at, if you look like early war, 2022, early 2023, there was some good footage of like, that was primarily like DJIs dropping grenades and munitions on folks. Then they started introducing the first person attack drones. So like strap a munition and fly it into something.
Yeah.
But what they've been doing lately, which has been really, really impressive, is like they've got drones doing the standoff, doing the filming, then other drones doing the actual strikes, which, like from a social media, from a messaging perspective, has been
great. They're trying, yeah.
And then usually, like on the Ukraine stuff, then you usually see like, here's a QR code to like donate so we can buy more drones.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So yeah, there's like 2 conflicts going on right now that are kind of just different, like Iran and Israel, which is like a group 3. They're lobbing missiles at each other, basically. And then in Ukraine, it's like the group 1 like threat, basically. They still have group 3s there too, but I'm saying like in the Israel conflict, there's not really a lot of group 1s going around.
I mean, probably more than you would think. If you
well, at least from a news perspective.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you look, Hezbollah has been doing some interesting things. I think I saw a video a month ago or something of them taking out some Israeli counter drone or air defense systems using group 1 first person attack drones and like striking the radars.
Man, that's crazy. I mean, just starting to just hit these big pieces of equipment with cheap drones.
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's and I don't know, back to kind of like your point and what your company does. I think in particular, when you start talking about like mass drone swarm attacks, like at some point you have to think about the defense differently, right? And this is, so the Ukrainians are having this problem because they're launching Patriot interceptors and some of these more limited missiles to shoot down a Shahed or a Garin 2, which is like a relatively cheap, inexpensive drone. Where we've really seen this disconnect, and I was just talking to some colleagues about this, is our operations in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, right? So the Houthis, or Ansar Allah, they're the Houthi majority rebel group in Yemen that, with tons of support and backing and technical know-how and weapons from Iran, have essentially shut down commercial traffic in the Red Sea, thereby restricting traffic through the Suez Canal. And the U.S. Navy and all of and many of our partners and allies, the Brits, the French, Japanese, and some others, have just parked a ton of warships in the region to try to like shoot down all these ballistic missiles, these surface drones, but also a lot of the anti-ship drones. And when you look at the cost difference between a U.S. Navy destroyer shooting an SM-2 or an SM-3 air interceptor missile to like knock down some really cheap drone, it's like that's just not a good exchange rate. And then I think in particular when you see like adversaries get better at producing more drones, at some point they're just going to overwhelm the defenses. So the work that your company's doing and some others in the counter UAS space, I think, is vital, because we're going to find ourselves soon, if we're not already there, at a point where the ability to overwhelm defenses with massive drone swarms.
I mean, I think I run a company in this, so it's kind of messed up to say, but the countering is just always a losing battle almost.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be very hard.
Yeah.
To do the countering of the drones, but we're trying, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
what do you think? What are your thoughts on glide bombs?
Yeah, so the glide bombs. So the Russians with their FAB, the FAB generation of the bolt-on kits to turn them into longish range glide bombs, I think is certainly a justification for improved air defenses and longer range air defenses. I think, well, we know that the Russians started using the glide kits for their
they're
bombs.
using glide bombs a lot over there right now.
Oh, 100%.
That's like that. That's even more than drones in some cases, I think.
Yeah, and I know. So unfortunately, it's like it's a constant yin and yang, action counter reaction.
Yep.
Where the Ukrainians got really, really good at air defense. We got them a bunch of Patriot batteries, the NASAMS, some of the other European air defense missile systems, where they were really having a lot of success in shooting down Russian aircraft who were operating relatively close to the front lines to drop these bombs pre-glide. And the response from the Russians were, okay, we'll develop these glide kits that allows our airplanes to stay further out, have more standoff from the Ukrainian air defenses, and then just like lob these glide systems. And there's right now, as far as I know, there's no real good defense for it, because the glide bombs don't have a large enough radar cross section to target them effectively. Yeah, you'd still run into that same problem of like, am I going to shoot a Patriot missile interceptor?
I think a vision-based gun could help.
Yeah, no, I mean that's true, because frankly, at the end of the day, I mean the Russian glide kits aren't. I mean, they're accurate enough. Like they seem to be able to 50 meter. Give or take, so usually enough given the size of some of the bombs to to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. I know the Ukrainians are going to receive, I think it was the Australians had a bunch of glide kits that they were going to hand over for use on some of the aircraft. And I know that generally speaking, like the Western glide kits are.
Oh, you're saying like the Ukrainians want to get their own glide bombs.
Yeah. I think it was the Australians. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a few other countries. And I think the U.S. was also looking at providing some glide kits to bolt onto.
What's old is new again.
Yeah. No, it's.
There's always like a lot of, that's what I'm seeing is it's a lot of, there's always new software and new autonomy, but it's a lot of the old stuff just kind of reimagined.
Well, and Ukraine just writ large has really been huge for that. When you look at, Ukrainians have largely been armed by a lot of the things that the U.S. and our partners and allies were already phasing out. You look at like M113 armored personnel carriers running around. You look at, the old ATACMS missiles, which we've replaced in the U.S. inventory. But like a lot of this older tech is still apparently very, very functional and useful, particularly in this context.
Yeah. So we were talking about the Oura Ring earlier. I have to bring that back up.
Yeah.
So where do you keep it? Just right there?
Yeah. So I just keep the Oura Ring on my trigger finger there. I forget what the reasoning was on that versus another finger. But anyway, so
it tracks heart rate?
It tracks basically all your biometrics, temperature, heart rate. It can tell when you're asleep. I wear it when I do my cardio. Obviously, I can't wear it when I lift. But yeah, it tracks all your cardio, how many steps you get.
Do you lift, bro?
I do. Not as much.
That's not an Ozempic body.
No, it's not an Ozempic body, but and not as much as I should lift. But it's been great. Like I was saying when we were talking before the show, it just really tells me how messed up my sleep pattern is, how I need to be sleeping better.
We should have got a lift in at the YMCA right here before the episode this morning. Get our pump on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Next time.
Okay, so it tracks the sleep, tells you how bad you're doing.
Yep. I'm not getting enough sleep. I'm not,
It's because you're working on the new company, right?
Yeah. So, like I said, I've been over at CenCore Group now for several months. Great company, primarily working in the Intel community. My division, what we're working on is some of the cutting edge communications, particularly in the top secret and special access program.
Are you doing
facilities.
like SIGINT, like you're trying to extract signals, or
no? We don't provide those services. We provide the facilities in which that work can be done.
Okay.
Just because, in particular, one of the challenges that we have our intelligence professionals and our special operators is some of these austere locations that we were talking about where we spend a lot of our time don't necessarily have the developed infrastructure and the certified facilities to do those sorts of activities. So what the company I'm with, what CenCore, what my company does is we produce those. It's a SCIF,
Yeah, what does SCIF stand for?
Yeah. So
for the listeners, we know, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. Secure compartmented information facility. Sensitive compartmented information facility. So the SCIFs and then the SAPIF, Special Access Program facilities, is just where like this classification level of stuff can be done. So what we're trying to do is enable our war fighters and our intelligence professionals, because like I was saying, it's one of these facilities in a container. You can put it on an airplane, you fly it anywhere in the world, you take it out the back, and now you've got that capability that you wouldn't have before. So it's innovative. Obviously I'm a little biased because it's the company it's my company. So, so doing well.
That seems like a good business.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, no matter what happens in the world, we know intelligence professionals and special operators are going to be running around the world and are going to need these capabilities.
Okay. And what about you also work on some nonprofits?
Yeah. So, in addition to my continuing uniform service with the Guard and my professional work with CenCore Group, I've got a bunch of nonprofits. I mean, starting at the top of the list, I'm on my 4th term now as the elected National Director of External Communications for the Special Forces Association. It's the largest 501c19 that brings together all the special forces.
Is that
armies.
SOAA or?
No, that's the other one.
Okay.
So yeah,
you're on that too.
I am on that too. But yeah, so
I feel like I met the guy who's like red hair.
Daniel Elkins.
Yeah.
So I'm Daniel's vice president. So SFA, that's all special forces qualified folks. I am the national vice president for the Special Operations Association of America. Daniel Elkins is the founder and president.
Okay.
We do a lot of Hill advocacy for veterans issues, specifically those that affect the special operations community.
Do you know a woman named Joy Schanenberger?
Joy? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think she introduced me to him.
Okay, that would make sense.
She's in the Pentagon now.
Well, shout out.
Trying to get Joy on the pod.
Okay, well, she would be a great guest.
Yeah.
And shout out to Daniel. He's up at Harvard getting his master's, just had his first kid. So
sweet.
He's busy as well. So let's see, SFA. So I am the chair of the advocacy committee for No One Left Behind. It's a 501c3 that's focused on special immigrant visas, mainly the Iraqi and Afghan interpreters that we worked with downrange. There's a program in place that's supposed to allow them to get citizenship, or basically come to the United States under a visa and at some point apply for citizenship. I was the director of evacuations in 2021 during the Afghan evac, so that was exciting times. Lots of sleepless nights getting Afghans out. Let me see. I mentioned either in the intro or before that, I'm the director of engagements for the Irregular Warfare Initiative, which is a 501c3 based out of, stood up between West Point and Princeton University.
What does that do?
Yeah, so the Irregular Warfare Initiative we've been around now we just celebrated our 4th anniversary. We were kind of like the first movers in the space of, we're going to be a nonprofit that brings together practitioners, policymakers, and academics that think and work and do things in the irregular warfare space. I consider myself lucky to have been in all 3 of those categories at some point in my life.
It's kind of like a think tank.
Yeah, definitely very think tanky. In fact, here, let's take the opportunity. I should have been pulling all these up.
No, let's pull it up.
Yeah, so if, just irregularwarfare.org. Because we were the first mover, we got to get Irregular Warfare.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Yeah, so you see we've got articles. I got a bunch of articles, but we have some great authors.
Do you give this like to the Hill? Like people
mine.
on the Hill?
Wait, scroll down real quick.
Yeah, there we go.
There's me. That's my latest.
Ukraine Railway. Let's pull that up.
Yeah, that was my latest with IWI.
Oh, okay.
So, and like I said, these are also linked through my LinkedIn.
So who's the audience for this?
So the audience, I mean, some of it is talking kind of to ourselves, the policymakers, practitioners, and academics that are working in this space. Obviously, we have a strong presence here in DC, huge presence in the Pentagon. Like we're looking to influence thought around these ideas. And there's a ton of as I said, we were the first movers in the space, but as other organizations have cropped up, like I said, the Irregular Warfare Center was stood up a couple years ago with federal funding. We do have a lot of like crosstalk and engagement. Like I was just out moderating some panels for IWC's last event in Annapolis 2 weeks ago. And the Hill, like we obviously engage very strongly with, there's the relevant committees, House and Senate Armed Services, House and Senate Foreign Affairs, the Intel committees.
To help them shape where they should be appropriating.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So
that's really good.
Yeah.
You're a true patriot.
Well, thank you. No, we are a team. I don't know if we want to go back to the other two websites.
Go back, yeah. What's the other one?
So specialforcesassociation.org.
Here we go.
So this is SFA. Like I said, I'm on the national board there.
Similar goal or?
No, so SFA is more of a fraternal organization.
Okay.
We're organized into chapters all across the United States. We even have several overseas. And it's really just to like provide that community for the special forces community. So
it's more of like an egalitarian brotherhood.
Yeah, like we do a little bit of Hill engagement. Now, full disclosure, I also like combine my efforts there with, if you want to pull up SOAA.org.
Yep. This is the one I know.
Yeah, this is the one you know with Daniel. So they're more advocacy focused, and you see like we focus around our national security operations and politics and policy. So that's more. We don't have like a membership model at SOA, but we are definitely focused on issues. So that's 3.
That's busy, and then your day job.
Well, I got a couple more nonprofits.
We gotta go through them all.
Yeah, sorry. So www.nooneLeft.org. So yeah, No One Left Behind. This is the organization with the special immigrant visas, the Iraqi and Afghan interpreters. We're actually right now working the Hill trying to get a permanent SIV program in place so we could cover our interpreters in places like Yemen and Syria and all the places in Africa that I worked. And then the last one before I go forward, let's see. Okay, yeah, let's go to. Okay, this is going to be a hard one. CORIOLI.org. All right. So the Coriolis Institute, I'm the director of development at the Coriolis Institute. This is a 501c3. If you can pull up the projects there at the top.
Yeah, see them.
We've got projects all around the world. The organization, we got our start with doing reintegration for former FARC rebels in Colombia. There's a project in Mexico with former cartel hitmen, getting them off drugs and back into society.
How do you do it? What are the projects?
Yeah, so
do you put people there?
Yeah, so we've got people in most all of these locations, or there are projects that we've gone to and come back. If you want to scroll,
unarmed.
Yeah, 100% unarmed. It's all the Chicago, Illinois, the Veteran Restorative Justice Project. That's one of our flagship projects. In fact, one of the things that a lot of our donors gravitate towards
in the homeland.
Yeah, so particularly as we come up on the back end of the global war on terror and all that, like many of our veterans come back with post-traumatic stress disorder, other injuries that have then required them to get on medication or do that slip over into narcotics.
Where do you fall on the MDMA for special forces with PTSD?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all about any sort of potential treatment as long as everyone goes in with like. I think
they said no. Right?
Yeah, they did say no,
but it had some promise. But I think they probably found something messed up with it.
I don't know if there was anything. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I also know that like traditional pharma probably was opposed to that. I would like to see, right, wrong, or indifferent, I think, under this incoming Trump administration, RFK is going to have some say in some of the medical stuff.
Yeah.
And I think he's been pretty open to alternative medicines.
Look, if nothing, where I land, and I don't really know enough about the science, but if nothing else is working for the soldier, the troops, like, why not try some of this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if your
mind's already gone,
Yeah, well, and I know this is one of the challenges around still serving veterans versus those that are completely out. So, as you know, as a former holder of a security clearance, like can't touch pretty much any drug whatsoever, which I think is problematic, particularly for still serving
nicotine
members.
And booze.
Yeah, nicotine, booze, and caffeine. That's about it. But like
sugar.
Yeah, so to get treatment while you're still in service with some of these alternative medicines, I think is going to be problematic and needs some legislative look. For folks that are out that don't have a security clearance, like I don't see why they shouldn't be able to.
Yeah, and like try to do whatever they can to fix their mind. I mean, it's just
at this point
horrible.
Yeah, but yeah, so like the Restorative Justice Project, helping encourage specialized courts and providing services to veterans that were like dealing in many cases with some of these like substance abuse or mental health issues that like led them to whatever activity got them on the wrong side of the law, and giving them unique pathways that respect their experiences and their unique challenges to get them on the other side. And then the last project, if you want to go back, I guess what I'll just say, there's
a throwback one, yeah.
Yeah, two I wanted to flag, the Ukraine. So the Ukraine project, we did a big conference out in London where we've been working with a number of Ukrainian veteran organizations, because they have a Ministry of Veteran Affairs, but it's not anything like what we have here in the States, and trying to identify and develop some pathways for Ukrainian veterans to reintegrate into society. And then the last one I'll flag, I think there's the Afghan project further down. Yeah, that one. So the Coriolis Institute, working in conjunction with Honor the Promise, organization that's focused on Afghan commandos, to really like examine and identify challenges and recommendations for reintegration for Afghan National Special Operations Forces in the U.S. So anyway, I think I hit all the major nonprofits that I'm involved with. I don't think I'm sure.
So on the Ukraine one, what's the goal?
Yeah, so the Ukraine one is in particular, like, this war, what most Americans don't realize, and for your audience, is like the war in Ukraine the Russian war against Ukraine has been going since 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea, the Little Green Men, which in reality were Russian troops, invaded Donbas, and the Ukrainians have been fighting a low-level war from 2014 to 2022.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize. I knew that, but a lot of people don't realize that.
And there's been tons of veterans, tons of dudes with amputations and horrific injuries. Now, of course, the full-scale invasion came when Russia wasn't achieving its objectives through proxies in February of 2022. So then, of course, there's been a huge uptick in the number of wounded Ukrainians and Ukrainian veterans that need to return back to civilian society. And the Ukrainians, I mean, they're in the middle of fighting a major war, so I don't blame them. They don't have a lot of resources dedicated against that process. Like I said, they have a Ministry of Veteran Affairs. It's not well resourced. It's not particularly well set up. So what Coriolis and some of our partners that you see there on the text were doing was bringing together all these stakeholders. So a bunch of Ukrainian nonprofit groups that work in the veteran reintegration space. Coriolis, which has the worldwide experience that we were talking about. We did have reps from the Ministry of Veterans Affairs in Ukraine, as well as the London School of Economics and a bunch of other folks that like have some expertise in how do you reintegrate veterans into societies. And it was like I said, we did the conference, but there's been follow-on activities and reports about what are the challenges, what are some of the things that we should do to improve reintegration for Ukrainian veterans, but then also getting funding, securing funding to like put against those efforts. So, Coriolis we brought all the folks together, we're driving the research, but then at the end of the day, we're also relying on the local partners in Ukraine to do like a lot of the actual work.
That makes sense. I'm doing a Ukraine project right now. I'm a producer on a film coming out that's we just applied to Sundance. We'll see if we get in.
Yeah.
But basically, it follows Ukrainian dancers through the war. They don't call themselves ballerinas because they're mad at Russia.
Yeah.
So they're dancers, but they're ballerinas. And it follows them through the war and kind of goes through like all their husbands and boyfriends dying basically on the front lines. It's pretty sad.
Yeah.
But it's meant to be like a piece about, the tragedy of all of this. And it kind of humanizes some of the population in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So I'll send you it.
No, I'd love to see it. And I think that's an important message, particularly, we are now almost 3 years into the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. I know there's a lot of talk about like donor fatigue and whether or not it's worth the continued support to the Ukrainians. And I do think it's important to do some of that humanizing, to be like, hey, at the end of the day, it's not really just about dollars and cents. Like there's lives on the line. And by humanizing them, I think it helps folks put themselves in their shoes and like, hey, what would I want if I were in that position.
On the podcast here, it's a safe space to opine. So you can tell me how you want it to all. Like, where do you think this goes? Like, what do you want to have happen?
Well, I mean, the election last week is going to be very, very determinative, I think, in the outcome.
You think it's going to be? You think he's going to stop the war?
I mean, I think
how much influence do we really have? You know, like, honestly, it's
I mean, I think President Trump is going to do everything in his power to negotiate an end to the war as quickly as possible. I think what those terms are or how the war ends is going to be really driven. A lot of those factors may be out of his control, right? Like, fascinating. Like the Russians have at least responded to some of the overtures. I think Putin said something about like he'd be willing to talk to Trump.
So you think they'll just like kind of give up some of their land to Russia and call it a day?
So like President Zelensky and the Ukrainian government have made it pretty clear, and I think most of the polling I've seen from Ukraine would suggest that like his people, his domestic population, isn't going to accept any ceding of territory. You know, I'm a strong supporter of Ukraine. I would really like to see them get back all of their territory. My suspicion is if you were to put a gun to my head right now and say like, how's it going to end? My suspicion is Russia will retain some territory. I don't know what that is. If it's Crimea, if it's all the territory that it's currently holding.
Really the Donbass region.
Yeah, so like
or just kind of where it's contested, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number I've seen most recently is the Russians hold something like 18% of Ukraine's territory. I don't think anything in the immediate future is going to change that dynamic. Like the Russians are still making slow but steady progress in Donbass. I don't think there's really any danger of the Ukrainians like liberating Crimea anytime now.
I mean, the longer it goes, the better for Russia. Right?
Oh, 100%. And Putin can't really back down either, right? Like depending on what numbers you believe, you know, his total losses are somewhere between 350,000 and I think the number that I've seen from the other extreme is like 700 and 7,000. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But so like Putin can't say, oh, all right, my bad.
What do you think about the North Koreans coming up there?
Yeah, so I did another podcast with Andy Milburn. It's his Eyes On podcast. So I don't know if you want to pull that up, but I talked a little bit about that. And you know, it's kind of my feeling on that was so all the intelligence suggests that the North Koreans have sent something like 10,000 troops over to
so not many.
Russia. So not many right now. And that's not going to be determinative, right? Because like the Russians are going through anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 casualties a day right now.
Yeah.
Now, if this is like the first tranche and the North Koreans are going to send like, you know, I saw one number of something like upwards of a total of 100,000 troops, like that's then becomes a significant
difference. Yeah.
That will make a huge
an
difference.
escalation.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good escalation.
But at that point, what does the U.S. and the West do, right? Like, we still are technically in a state of war with North Korea. The United Nations is technically in a state of war with North Korea since the armistice in 1953. So, like, do we just stand by and let this happen? Like, let North Korea invade a European country? Or do we step up and respond in some way more forcefully?
I'm not a geopolitical expert, and obviously I don't know what the new administration is going to do, but I feel like they're going to be pretty focused on some home matters.
Yep.
So,
100%.
Which makes the Ukraine thing kind of like, you know, it's still important for the administration, but it's probably more of a secondary thing.
Yeah.
I think, compared to some of their domestic priorities.
No, 100%. And you know, I think that I would offer that a lot of our European partners and allies have been stepping up more in the last probably like 6 to 8 months. You've seen some fairly sizable donations in military equipment. You've seen our European partners start to do invest far more in their own defense, I think, in kind of like as a hedge against President Trump coming back into office. And I think that's a good thing overall. I think that I don't think Europe's going to abandon Ukraine because not for nothing, like particularly if you look at Eastern
it's a wall between them and
the longer the Russians stay busy trying to invade Ukraine, the better it is for all the rest of Europe. So I do think you're going to see them step up more. I think, you know, the U.S. will probably temper our support to Ukraine.
Well, you see them; they're trying to like rush funding in now.
Yeah. The Biden administration is going to try to push that last $6 billion in aid across and into Ukraine, which I think will sustain them for a little while. But yeah, like the wild card is, I don't know what President Trump does. I think he wants to negotiate. Like I said, he wants the war to end sooner, but I think he also wants something that's, that everyone can live with.
Yeah. I think we'll see. I mean, my obviously I have no idea, but one of my investors is David Sachs, who's like the All In podcast guy.
Yeah.
You ever listen to that show?
Yeah. I've on occasion.
Yeah. So he takes more of a isolationist stance, I would say, on the issue. More classical libertarian isolationist. I would bucket him in here. And so there is that part of the administration that I think has that bent too. But I think there's a lot of competing influences going on, even around his inner circle of what to do there. I actually do believe it's a total wild card. Like I'm not.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't actually. I don't really know what they're gonna do.
No, yeah.
It'll be interesting to see.
It will be fascinating to see. I mean, like I said, I'm a strong Ukraine supporter, so I'd like to see us continue to support. But that said, yeah, I think it's a total wild card. I can see arguments for both sides. And I'm sure that everyone will be watching with great interest.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Not just, well, I'm interested from just the geopolitical perspective, but also from a defense technology perspective. Just we follow it because it's relevant to our business.
Oh, 100%.
But obviously, the whole thing's just terrible. That's why I'm doing the movie with the dancers.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing that. And to the extent to which, if you want to get involved with any of the other nonprofit stuff I'm doing,
I'll send you. Yeah, this is not a financial motivation for me. This movie,
no,
not making money doing a short film about Ukrainian dancers. Trust me.
No.
Man, okay. So what about other do you follow the startup scene, the defense tech startup ecosystem at all?
A little bit. I mean, not as closely as I probably should, but I mean,
see any promising technologies coming out?
Yeah. So I mean, I think we hit on this a little bit earlier, maybe before the show. Autonomy, particularly as it relates to drones. Let's bring it full circle.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Ukraine has shown us is that the current and future drone operating environment is going to be increasingly contested with electronic warfare. So as such, a lot of the traditional, I was talking about, where it's hey, I can fly my drone line of sight with a radio beam, isn't going to be the case anymore, and that's what we're seeing. So, I mean, there's been some innovations. I think you see in Ukraine some use of fiber optic cable to guide drones in EW and electronic warfare environments. But that's a stopgap measure, and that only gets you so much range. I think once you start talking about particularly Cat 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, Group 3, 4, and 5 drones, you're going to have to start talking more about autonomy.
Yeah, you're thinking just full autonomous drones that are pre-programmed with their mission.
Yep, 100%. Now, obviously, that
kill the highest value thing it sees.
Yeah, the ethical, there's some ethical considerations, and I've done some writing in the past on the ethical considerations of taking the person out of the loop on targeting for drones. I think, regardless of how one feels about the ethics of it, I think it's just going to be a requirement.
It's just happening?
Yeah, it's just going to happen. Well, I mean, we know it is. The Russians, again, this whole action-reaction cycle, we saw the Russians start to put backwards-facing cameras on some of their, Group 2 and 3 UAVs that then, allow the system to autonomously respond to attack by, a Ukrainian drone. We've seen loitering munitions are kind of a version of autonomous targeting for a drone-like capability, and I think you're going to see that become more and more prevalent. I know that I've probably talked to a dozen or so startups that are doing some version of autonomous navigation.
Yeah. Have you seen, the Switchblade, obviously?
Yep. I'm very, very familiar with the Switchblade.
I mean, I think that's probably one of our most successful products.
Yeah.
AeroVironment.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's a great system.
They're buying a ton of them still. We are buying a ton of them as a country.
Yeah. There's the 300s, the Switchblade 300s and the 600s. I think pretty much everyone's switched to now. They're great systems. We even used them in Iraq when I was there.
Yep. Jack, pull up the stock chart of AVAV. I do this on a lot of episodes, actually. Let's pull up the market cap. Oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
So as you can see, the Switchblade is taking off. I actually really, what's the market cap? This thing, 6.6 billion.
Yeah,
and that really doubled in the last 2 years, roughly. Anduril's valued at 14 billion on paper, private, but AeroVironment is looking cheap.
By
compared to
comparison.
by comparison.
Jump in there, and I might
not
invest in some later.
not financial
not advice,
but
so
hot.
Yeah, so your question, I think autonomy is like the big new hotness. I mean, drones, there's tons of companies that make drones. There's always a new company coming in or dropping out of the market, but I do think anything related to like the autonomy, the software, the programming, I think that's going to be huge as far as tech startups.
Yeah. I think like as they develop the Switchblade platform more, they'll take the human out of the loop more and more for less comms, so they can't jam it. And that's probably one of our, that loitering munition probably is the category winner there, I would say. I mean, there's some other startups trying to build loitering munitions, but dude, that company's been around for 50 years.
Well, yeah, I was going to say it is dated now. I think I wrote this back in like 17 or 18. There's a piece, it was in Small Wars Journal talking about the ethics of autonomous systems, where I kind of laid out the fact that the U.S. and the West and some of the other countries that I'd consider like in our orbit have thus far had very strong reservations about taking human out of the loop for targeting. To the point where I think it's like even built into some. There is actually DoD policy that's like there will always be a human in the loop for a targeting decision. Whereas like the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians are like, forget that. They recognize the clear advantage given by removing the human from the loop.
Yeah, it's just a matter of time for us then.
Yeah. So, well, I hope so, right? Like,
I would, and if we start losing some battles,
Well, yeah, and I think going back to our, some of our earlier conversations, I think that many of these wars of the future are going to be rather short and sharp. So you might not actually, you can innovate and figure out what you did wrong and maybe win the next one. But like, as far as winning the first fight in the next war, if we continue to restrain ourselves, I think we'll find ourselves at a huge disadvantage.
Yeah. In the Navy, you've got like the C-UAS, that auto targets.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. Well, C-UAS, and then I'm trying to remember what they called the system when it was ashore, because we always had them in various places.
The phalanx?
In Iraq and Afghanistan. And I remember some of the, as I understand, the munitions are supposed to self-detonate, so like they don't necessarily fall back on on populated centers, but that's an awesome system. It is it targets autonomously, but that's also like a very unique case. Use case.
What about lasers? What do you net out?
Yeah. Well, going back to what we were talking about, like the defensive challenges of dealing with drone swarms. Like I know the Israelis, I think I'm trying to remember the name of theirs. It's like Iron Shield or something. They're supposed to have their first operational laser, which is absolutely necessary given like the scale.
I've read about operational lasers for 20 years now, though.
Oh yeah, we've been mucking around with it.
Yeah, lasers are they're probably going to happen, but I don't know. There's something about them that just never actually works.
Well, yeah, the tech is always the challenge, right? And but it's going to be a necessity. Like this is one of the things that we look at with war games, in particular with Pacific scenarios, with the Chinese, with with their A2AD capabilities. So anti-access area denial. Like you look at their use of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles and anti-ship cruise missiles and all of these things, like they've extended the bubble of where they could potentially hit our bases and ships out to the second island chain, which is almost, I think I'd have to go back and look, but it's like Japan and anyway. But the point being is like when we look at the missile batteries of our capability to defend against those, like there's not enough missiles in our inventory to shoot down all the missiles that they would shoot at us. So when you start looking at that kind of scenario, like you have to go with something that's cheaper cost per shot, like a laser. Now, admittedly, to your point, like the tech's not there, I don't think, and hopefully this Israeli system.
Yeah, I think it's the targeting switch. So, like for me, what I like to get it on the target and then kill it and then move on to the next target. It's just a lot of effort.
Yeah,
but I think that it's got some promise. I think it's got to get fat. Like if you watch the lasers, they're like really slow moving and
and I think even I'd have to go back. Like I think I can't remember if the Israeli system was Iron Shield or whatever it was called, but like even then you still have to hold the beam on the target for a significant period of time, I think, to disable it.
Yeah,
and then you got to slew to the next one.
And this is before the drone makers even get the shielding. Like some sort of reflective coating.
Yeah, that's true. And then there'll be some reaction on the part of the offensive.
Yeah, I'm not sure about lasers. I want to believe It's like X-Files. I want to believe. Do you ever watch X-Files?
I loved X-Files as a kid. Somewhere I got the shirt. I got the shirt of like the poster with the UFO.
David Duchovny was sweet.
Yeah. I wasn't super thrilled with when they did like the 1-season reboot.
Oh, I didn't watch that. I didn't want to ruin it.
Yeah.
It's like, do you ever watch Dexter?
Yeah.
The final season recently. Like, I couldn't even watch.
Yeah. I was like, let me just keep the memories of
the original first 4 seasons.
Yeah, exactly.
That show is so. I just rewatched the first 4 seasons. I don't know if you Dexter's wife dies in season 4. You know, Rita.
Spoil. Yes.
Yeah.
No,
Spoiler.
I remember.
This is enough. Now I can spoil.
Yeah.
But like,
when did that show end? Like a decade ago or something?
Pull up John Lithgow.
Yeah.
He was the bad guy in this season.
Yeah, I was just talking about him because I'm watching him now.
This guy is an amazing actor.
Yeah.
First of all, he's the Trinity killer.
I remember.
And when Dexter's killing him at the end of the season, he goes, "It's already over." and then you get to see in the Dexter's eyes, like, "Oh shit, he just killed my wife."
Yeah.
Like he knew then.
Well, it's funny. I'm watching Lithgow right now in The Old Man with Jeff Bridges, and like the dude doesn't age. He like hit a certain age and he just stays there.
I mean,
and he's great.
Phenomenal. A phenomenal actor. I mean, this is where we ended today. We ended on,
I think, John Lithgow.
I think this is it. This is where we ended, dude. Doug, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no, pleasure's all mine. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Dude. Yeah, for sure. We got you back on.